She called him from the ER, begging for help as her body shut down. But this ruthless mafia boss silenced her call to drink wine with her backstabbing best friend. For 3 years, Dante Bellini ignored his wife, unaware that his coldness was literally killing her from chronic neglect. When he finally comes home to an empty closet and her diamond ring left on his bed, the most feared man in New York falls to his knees. He sets about to unleash absolute hell to get her back. But is it already too late?
Step into the midnight hour with me. Picture a freezing emergency room, the kind where fluorescent lights hum like angry bees, draining whatever warmth you have left. There sits Sophia Bellini,
looking utterly hollowed out, her knuckles bone white, gripping the metal bed rail, dialing her husband's number with a shaking hand. 3 rings. 4. Voicemail. Across the city, in a sprawling penthouse, her face flashes on his phone. Dante Bellini, the untouchable boss, glances at the screen, and he just looks away. Like the woman he promised to protect simply does not exist. It makes you wonder. The loneliest place in the world isn't an empty room. It is being ignored by the very person who is supposed to be your safe harbor. It cuts deeper when you see who is sitting across from him. Sipping a heavy red wine, laughing at his jokes, is Gianna, Sophia's supposedly loyal best friend. Dante hits mute without a single flinch of guilt. Back in that sterile hospital room, Sophia's hand goes limp, the phone clatters onto the blanket. The doctor keeps talking, but the words blur into white noise. If you look closely, you can witness the exact second a human spirit snaps. 3 agonizing years of holding up a toxic marriage, and the foundation finally crumbles. Sometimes the people we would gladly take a bullet for are the ones holding the weapon. We hold on tightly, hoping they will change. But by the time they realize what they tossed away, we are already a ghost. The storm is officially here. Sophia lies flat on the stiff mattress, eyes locked on the ceiling. She counts the tiny holes in the panels just to anchor her mind, to keep the quiet panic from swallowing her whole. Beside her, the IV drip ticks down like a slow, cruel metronome, reminding her she is breathing even when her heart feels ready to quit. A voice breaks the silence. Mrs. Bellini. Sophia turns her head, every motion looking unbearably heavy. Dr. Chun stands by the bed, holding a chart tightly against her chest like a shield. She says the test results are in. Sophia feels a cold knot tighten in her throat. She already knew her body was failing. You cannot outrun exhaustion when your soul is the thing that is tired, no matter how hard you try to pretend otherwise. Listen to me, we are talking about a darkness so heavy she had to grip the hallway walls just to stay on her feet. Food had become an enemy, her stomach's in constant rebellion. Sophia barely manages a whisper, asking the doctor how bad it really is. Dr. Chun hesitates, and we all know that the doctor's silence is the loudest warning bell of all. The physician admits they found alarming irregularities in her blood work, combined with the fainting. It is a grim picture. But then the clinical mask drops. With raw sympathy, she asks Sophia when she last had a full night of sleepy, or Sophia draws a blank up. Her days had dissolved into a miserable waiting game. Life passes us by when we spend all our time waiting for someone who never intends to show up. She had spent years starving for a breadcrumb of affection, begging to be seen within his dark, violent empire. Sophia tries to brush it off with a hollow laugh, blaming it on routine stress. Dr. Chun sees right through the lie. She leans in and delivers the brutal truth. Sophia's body is systematically shutting down, collapsing under the weight of long-term emotional starvation. This is not a rough patch. It is years of quiet suffering taking its toll. Trembling, Sophia reaches for her phone, murmuring that she needs to call her husband. She knows it is a fool's errand. It is a tragic flaw in human nature, reaching back into the fire that burned us, hoping it might bring warmth. The phone just rings, the empty sound echoing against the cold hospital walls. At last, Dante picks up. His voice is a slab of ice, heavy with impatience, treating his wife like an unwanted solicitor. He clips his words, claiming he is busy and she needs to wait. Sophia stammers, her voice cracking as she confesses she is in the hospital. His response, he snaps, that he is organizing an event with Gianna, and the line goes dead. Just like that, Sophia stares at the darkened screen. The betrayal cut casts deep. Gianna's, her closest confidant, is the sea stealing her life. The doctor gently asks if anyone is coming to sit with her. Something in Sophia breaks, but it doesn't shatter, it hardens. Realizing you are entirely alone is a terrifying plunge, but it is also the moment you finally stop waiting for a rescue. She whispers back that nobody is coming. Stay with me here, because the shift in scenery is brutal. High above the glittering Manhattan skyline is inside a penthouse smelling of old money and fresh betrayal. Dante slides his phone away without a shred of remorse. The dark ink tattooed on his neck catches the dim, expensive lighting as he turns back to his leather sofa. Gianna sits there, watching him over the rim of her wine glass. A slow, calculating smirk plays on her lips. She asks if everything is all right, though her eyes carry the chilling warmth of a predator. Dante simply waves a heavy hand, brushing his wife's existence aside. It is a hard truth of life. A man who dismisses his own loyalty for the thrill of a shiny illusion will eventually find himself ruling over a kingdom of absolute nothing. Dante scoffs, claiming Sophia invents drama just to hear herself speak. Gianna's smirk sharpens into a blade as she labels Sophia as needy. The word hangs in the air, toxic and heavy. The true tragedy? Dante stays silent. Somewhere beneath the expensive suits and the blood-soaked mafia feuds, a ghost of his conscience remembers the fiercely loyal woman he once loved. He remembers how a father's sins often ruin the son, a cycle he is actively repeating. But ego is a powerful anesthetic. Instead of defending his wife, he pivots to the upcoming underground gala. The Marone syndicate will be present, and given the grim history between their families, failure is a death sentence. We often bury our guilt in ambition, blinding ourselves to the cliff edge right in front of us. Gianna insists he leave the gala entirely in her hands. She drews from the sofa, her silk dress pooling like dark water, and closes the distance between them. The sharp, heavy scent of her perfume invades his space, a bold contrast to Sophia's quiet grace. Gianna's voice drops to a low hum, promising him she knows exactly what the Empire requires. Her fingers trail down his tattooed arm, a deeply familiar gesture that screams of a line crossed long ago. In his pocket, the phone vibrates again. It is his wife, struggling for breath in a hospital bed, yet his expression remains carved in stone. Sometimes, the loudest betrayals aren't shouted. They happen in the quiet moments when we choose temptation over duty. Gianna whispers a demand to sit by his side as the host. With utter audacity, Gianna suggests Sophia lacks the spine for their brutal mafia world. Dante's jaw tightens, but shockingly, he agrees. He conveniently says that Sophia only stopped attending because he would abandon her in crowded rooms, leaving her to weep silently by the tall glass windows. While he plotted with Gianna, he nods, handing over the reins. Back in that sterile hospital room, Sophia watches her phone screen flicker and die, plunging her into total darkness. There is a profound clarity that only comes when you hit it absolute rock bottom. When you strip a person of their hope, you remove their fear right along with it. In that quiet room, a devastating decision takes root in Sophia's mind, the kind of cold, calculated choice that will burn an empire to the ground. You and I have seen how the universe loves to paint the sky grey when a heart finally breaks. Rain lashes against the hospital glass as Sophia forces her own discharge. Her hand trembles wildly as she signs the medical release letter, deaf to the doctor's urgent pleas for her to stay. She offers a hollow, practiced smile, claiming she needs to go home. But the concept of home is nothing but ash on her tongue now. It hasn't been in history since the nights grew cold and Dante turned his back. She slides her wedding ring onto a finger that has grown terrifyingly thin. Walking away from the ruins of your past is the hardest march you will ever make, but it is the only path forward. She steps out of the doors, laying the ghost of her former self behind, ready for war. A sleek black sedan waits at the curb, a bitter testament to Dante's cold efficiency. He treats his marriage like a logistical annoyance to be handled by low-level foot soldiers. The young driver catches her hollow gaze in the mirror, asking for an address. Sophia murmurs the location of the penthouse, resting her temple against the chilled window. She watches the rain-soaked streets of New York blur past, realizing her golden life was merely a gilded cage. Sometimes we build our own prisons, decorating the bars until we forget we are trapped inside. Arriving at the tower, the doorman offers her the tight, uncomfortable nod reserved for phantoms. She steps into the private elevator, the heavy steel doors sliding shut. The suffocating silence inside feels heavier than any bullet. Let's step into the shadows for a minute, you and I. Picture those glowing elevator numbers ticking upward, feeling less like a ride home, more like the final countdown to a tragedy. The heavy doors slide open to the penthouse, and the air immediately bites at your skin. It is freezing, hollow, built entirely to project Dante's iron-fisted mafia control rather than anything resembling a home. Sophia drifts across the marble floors like a ghost haunting the edges of her own life. She glides past the master bedroom they have not shared in seasons. She stares blankly at the closet, running a hand over silk dresses that will slip right off her fading, fragile frame. And then she stops, right there outside the heavy oak doors of Dante's private study, the one sanctuary she was absolutely forbidden to touch. She pushes the heavy open, stepping into a suffocating library lined with expensive books Dante never bothered to read. Her tired eyes fall on a framed wedding picture on his mahogany desk. She actually looked alive back then, but right next to that in a frame sits a small velvet box. Her stomach drops. Every instinct tells her to walk away, but she opens it anyway. Inside rests a diamond chain, nothing like the heavy jewels her mob boss husband normally buys to show her off. And the killing blow, a handwritten card tucked beneath the velvet. For G, a little something to remember last night. The hardest lesson we ever have to learn is this. When your gut screams that something is terribly wrong, you have to listen, because the truth rarely whispers. The delicate chain slips from her trembling fingers and pisses into the thick carpet. Gianna, her closest friend in this lonely, brutal world. The sheer weight of the betrayal hits her so hard the room begins to tilt. Grim warnings from her doctor about her failing health ring loud in her ears. But here is the tragic beauty of a broken spirit. She does not cry. The well is completely dry. Instead, Sophia drags a dusty suitcase from the closet, leaving the expensive bags untouched. She packs only the faded paperback novels and the simple silver necklace her mother left behind. Life offers us a painful but necessary truth here. Never carve away pieces of your own soul just to fit perfectly inside someone else's beautiful cage. It will always destroy you in the end. With her suitcase zip closed, she sits on the edge of that massive, freezing mattress and begins writing the final words they will ever share. Her pen moves sharply. She writes about the four desperate calls from Underworld last nights, the ones he let ring into the dark. She writes about slowly suffocating in his violent world while he watched her drown without throwing a lifeline. She finishes it by mentioning the delicate bracelet and Gianna, laying his cruel betrayal bare. She gave him her entire heart, and he treated her loyalty like ash. We all need to hear the lesson hidden in this heartache. Stop waiting in the dark for someone to suddenly wake up and realize your worth. If they cannot see your value, the most powerful thing you can do is pack your bags and walk away. She presses the pen down hard for the final line, writing the only words that matter now. I am done waiting. Do not look for me, because I am finally choosing myself. She folds the heavy paper, setting it neatly on his silk pillow, and slowly pulls the heavy diamond wedding band off her finger. Sitting there in the pale afternoon sunlight, it just looks like a tiny, shiny circle of broken promises. Sophia grabs her bag and walks out of that cold luxury prison without ever looking back. 3 agonizing hours later, the untouchable mafia boss unlocks the front door. The silence in the penthouse is so thick, it actually chokes him. Let this sink in for a moment. True freedom begins the exact second you find the courage to choose your own quiet peace over a fiercely toxic love. Dante yanks his dark silk tie loose, the black ink of his tattoos flashing as he paces like a trapped wolf. A massive underground deal just collapsed entirely. Months of careful planning washed down the drain because a rat in his crew talked. His knuckles are raw from dealing out his violent brand of justice, and all he craves now is a strong drink and the soft voice of his wife. He stops in the middle of the room, a sudden, heavy realization hitting him. He has not actually looked at Sophia in months, treating her like a forgotten shadow in his own story. He calls her name, but only the cold echoes answer. Here is a brutal reality of the human heart. We always take the most loyal, loving presence in our lives for granted, right up until the punishing silence finally hits. He tears open the bathroom door. Nothing. He rips open the closet, and the empty spaces where her clothes used to hang make his chest cave in. His eyes lock onto the bed. Resting on the mattress is a folded paper beside her glittering diamond ring. He grabs the letter, his eyes scanning the ink. She was in the hospital, pleading for him while he was sipping bourbon with Gianna. Then he reads the line about the bracelet, and the blood freezes in his veins. He had completely forgotten leaving it out, a meaningless prop meant for a charity auction. If there is one tragedy we can learn from Dante, it is this. A reckless lack of attention will always shatter the very relationships you arrogantly believe are entirely bulletproof. This is where the story twists the knife, my friends. That bracelet was never meant for Gianna. It was a hollow public relations stunt to make Dante look generous to the press. But how was his broken wife supposed to know that? She had spent months sitting alone in the dark, watching him leave every night with her supposed best friend. She spent years making excuses for his coldness, only to be sent to voicemail from a hospital bed. Dante dials her number like a desperate madman, but the line goes dead every single time.
The untouchable king of the city is finally breaking down. The lesson here is written in tears. Communication is the absolute bedrock of love. Leave someone wandering in the dark,
and they will eventually find their own way out. His shaking hand grips the phone as he summons his enforcers. That terrifying tone that makes grown men tremble is completely gone, replaced by raw panic. He orders them to tear the city apart and find his wife no matter the cost. Then, the most feared bear's boss on the East Coast collapses onto their empty bed, pulling her abandoned pillow to his chest. Days blur into agonizing nights. His crew shakes down every safe house in the state, but Sophia is a ghost. She erased her footprint entirely. He forgets to sleep, tormented by memories of the hopeful smile she wore on their wedding day. The takeaway here is blindingly clear. You can hold all the money and power in the world, but it will never buy back the fragile trust of someone you spent years slowly tearing apart. Staring at the ceiling, all Dante can see is how she used to wait up for him after the bloody turf wars, washing his wounds and handing him hot tea. Then he remembers the chilling realization of how it all faded. She just stopped waiting. The spark in her beautiful eyes died right in front of him, and his ego convinced him she would accept her place. Yes, he was so busy building an empire that he did not see the foundation crumbling. Fast forward to 3 a.m. His top enforcer, Marco, steps into the smoky study. The floor is littered with dead-end search reports. Marco speaks with that incredibly careful tone you only use when delivering a fatal blow. The lesson rings loud here. Never demand fierce loyalty from a partner when you are only feeding them scraps of affection. Marco clears his throat, confirming the hospital rumors are entirely true. Sophia had been rushed into the ward that night, suffering from dangerously high stress and severe malnutrition. Marco stutters, mentioning the doctor noted signs of something darker. Dante snaps out of his chair, demanding to know what he means. Marco looks the terrifying mafia Don directly in the eye and drops the hammer. Chronic neglect.
The medical staff said Sophia's body was physically shutting down because she had been emotionally starved for years. She fled the hospital against their strict advice just to get away from him.
Let us take a hard look at this reality. Emotional starvation is a very real violence, and ignoring someone's desperate cries leaves scars far deeper than any physical blow. I want you to sit with that for a second. Dante's utter lack of humanity broke his wife's body. His icy indifference pushed her fragile heart to the absolute edge. He grips the desk so tightly, his knuckles turn bone white, drowning in an ocean of crushing guilt. When he finally speaks, his voice is a deadly whisper. He asks Marco what the situation is with Gianna. Marco winces, knowing this will light a powder keg. Gianna has been bragging to the entire Underworld that she is Dante's new queen, and that he tossed his wife aside. That exact vicious rumor is why his massive business deal went up in flames. This leaves us with one incredibly vital life lesson. The toxic, greedy bee people you keep around just to stroke your fragile ego will always be the ones who ultimately burn your beautiful kingdom to ashes. Tonight, you and I are going to unpack a tragedy of arrogance. The truth finally slams into Dante, cold and unforgiving. His rivals walked because he looked like a reckless liability, a man parading a mistress while humiliating his own wife. Gianna was pure poison. She wrapped herself around his arm at every gala, ensuring Sophia's absence was the loudest sound in the room. Dante stands there, his jaw locked so tight the bone protests. He was entirely blinded by his own ego. His voice drops, heavy as a tombstone, ordering his enforcer to drag Gianna into the light. Left alone, the weight of that diamond ring burns against his chest. Let this be a lesson for the midnight hours. Pride builds walls that blind you, and the second you believe you are untouchable, you lose it all. Sophia's final words are trapped in his mind, echoing through the empty halls of his chest. Dante paces, promising the shadows that he will find her and prove she was his only real anchor. But a quiet, agonizing voice whispers the brutal reality. He is entirely out of time. Miles away across the weeping city, Sophia stands by a foggy apartment window. The rain traces lines against the glass, just like the tears she no longer sheds. 418 days has passed since she escaped that suffocating penthouse, killed her phone, and turned into a ghost. The midnight truth is heavy, but we must not face it. You cannot starve someone loved for years, then expect a single desperate apology to heal their soul. Some bridges simply burn down to the ash, leaving you stranded in the dark forever. This safe haven belongs to Elena, the one cousin Sophia kept off the grid, far away from her husband and his paranoid security sweeps. When Sophia first knocked on that door, she was nothing but a fragile shell. Elena pulled her inside, looked her in the eye, and told her she looked like a walking corpse. No soft words, just the honest truth she desperately needed. Over the past 2 weeks, Elena poured her soul into bringing her cousin back. The color is finally returning to Sophia's pale cheeks. Her voice does not crack anymore, and the long nights are no longer spent drowning in memories of the man who broke her. The lesson you need to carry is this: healing is not a sudden flash of light. It is woven from quiet, daily victories and finding the rare people who will hold your hand until the storm finally breaks. Let's pause and look at the wreckage together, you and I. Escape does not bring immediate peace, and Dante still haunts the silent corners of Sophia's mind. Imagine standing in a hot shower, only for the water to trigger the ghost of his touch, back when his hands actually carried love. At night, the vast emptiness of the bed feels like a quiet punishment. Her fingers constantly itch to check her dead phone. Is he tearing the city apart for her? Or is his mistress already sitting in her living room, draped in her silk robe? The cruelest part of this isolation is the lingering numbness. Here is a truth to remember when the nights get too long. Letting your anxious imagination fill in the blanks will only rob you of whatever of fragile peace you have finally managed to build. The trance breaks when Elena sets a warm mug on the table. Offering a look of fierce protectiveness, she tells Sophia as her eyes are completely hollow, like someone is scraping out her spirit. A broken, breathless laugh escapes Sophia's lips, a quiet surrender to the truth. Elena leans in, her gaze unwavering, and asks the heavy question, "Has he reached out?" Sophia shakes her head, whispering that the phone is still dead. Elena does not offer pity. She offers a lifeline of steel, reminding her that Dante spent 3 agonizing years watching her drown, while his own hand pushed her beneath the waves. Here is a vital lesson for the lonely hours. Keep the friends who act as your anchor. You need the ones as brave enough to stop you from walking back at the fire that burned you down. Guilt begins to suffocate Sophia. Her voice shakes as she spirals, whispering that she should have fought harder or screamed louder. Elena shuts the panic down instantly. Gripping her cousin's hands, she demands she stop carrying the weight of a guilty man's sins. Sophia gave him her entire soul, and he took it without a single flinch. The bitter truth is that love is never enough to save a bond if you are the only one doing the bleeding. The dam finally breaks. Devastated tears spill over the cheeks as she chokes out the tragic confession. She still loves him. Elena softens, knowing that enduring love is exactly what makes this agony so unbearable. Meanwhile, out in the dark, tires hiss against the wet pavement as a heavy black sedan pulls onto their street. Stick with me, because the shadows are about to deepen. Marco stands beneath a broken street lamp in the pouring rain, whispering that their ghost has been found. Across the river, Dante rids the detect and bolts into the storm before the call even ends. But when he reaches her building, the terrifying boss freezes. For 20 agonizing minutes, The king of the underworld stands paralyzed on the sidewalk. This is a man who orders executions without a single blink. Yet, faced with the reality that his wife is choosing a life without him, his hands are violently trembling. The fierce ink on his knuckles suddenly means nothing. Here is a harsh midnight lesson. Losing the one soul who grounds your heart will strip away all your armor, and turning the most ruthless wolf into a terrified coward. Desperation takes over. He presses the intercom, but the voice that answers is Elena. Dante demands his wife, clinging to his final shreds of authority. Elena tells him to rot in hell and cuts the feed. Madness takes hold. He slams the button repeatedly, his voice tearing as he screams into the storm he will never leave. The speaker crackles back, advising him to get comfortable in the flood. The boss of the city presses his head against the freezing metal, rain soaking his suit. Hearing a ruthless king say please is a haunting melody. He pleads just to know she is safe. Suddenly, the static shifts. A soft, hollow voice drifts through the speaker. It is Sophia. She sounds impossibly tired, quietly telling him to go home. Dante's voice fractures completely, begging to explain the bracelet. Dante screams into the intercom that the jewelry was never for his mistress. It was just a charity piece. He swears on his soul his hands never wandered. But here is the agonizing twist. Sophia's voice floats back, completely empty, stating she already knows. She found the auction receipt. Dante inhales a jagged breath of relief, but it dies instantly, replaced by pure confusion. If she knew he was faithful, why did she run? The answer cuts deeper than any blade, because without physical betrayal, he still chose Gianna over her every single day. Every cancelled dinner, every silenced call, every hollow stare. Here is a painful truth we cannot ignore. Emotional starvation destroys a human heart just as violently as infidelity. He spent years proving she meant absolutely nothing. Through the static, Sophia states she was always his last priority. Those words tear through his chest harder than a bullet. Dante presses his hands against the brick, begging her to open the door so he can fix this. But Sophia delivers a devastating truth. You cannot erase 3 years of agonizing neglect from a flooded sidewalk. The numbness in her voice shatters. She reminds him of the night she called from a hospital bed, terrified, only for him to say she had to wait because he was managing Gianna's drama. Dante chokes out that he did not know it was serious. Sophia's reply is a funeral bell. He never knew because he never cared to ask. Listen closely to this reality. When the person you love treats your pain as a minor inconvenience, you must gather your remaining strength and walk away. Dante keeps his hand pressed against the freezing metal, wishing he could feel her warmth. Stripped of his ego, he confesses he is a blind no-me. Sophia simply agrees, and the intercom cuts to a dead silence. For 3 brutal hours, the feared boss stands paralyzed in the storm, whispering his wife's name into the dark. Marco finally approaches, forcing his shivering king into the sedan before the rain takes him. But Dante is not going home to drown in grief. The sorrow in his eyes hardens into pure, lethal ice. He orders the driver to straight do so to deal with Gianna. Here is a lesson hidden in the wreckage. Sometimes you have to lose your entire world before your eyes adjust, finally revealing the snake that has been pulling your strings all along. We are crossing into the dark territory of revenge. By the time Dante kicks open Gianna's door, his men have secured the building. She is lounging on her pristine white sofa, offering him a hollow, practiced smile. She actually purrs that she was expecting him. Dante stands there, rain dripping from his coat, his legendary restraint fracturing. His is a dangerous rumble, as he states that she knew. Gianna attempts to play innocent, but the wolf is inside the room. He knows she watched his wife suffocate and eagerly pushed her toward the ledge. Her mask finally slips his wops. She spits venom, calling Sophia a weak creature who cried too much. Let me offer you a crucial warning tonight. Never trust a soul who builds their temporary success upon the broken pieces of another human being. The last thread of Dante's sanity snaps. He roars that Sophia was his wife. But Gianna just rises, the click of her heels echoing, coldly stating that Sophia was simply in the way. She fully embraces her villainy, confessing every twisted sin. She poisoned his business deals. She planted the affair rumors. She even smiles, admitting she staged the bracelet and forged the cruel letter perfectly designed to shatter his wife's mind. Dante's vision narrows to a tunnel of murderous red. He asks, his deep voice frighteningly calm, if she really wrote the note. She proud dryly nods, entirely unaware she is standing inches from the Grim Reaper himself. Remember this lesson before you sleep tonight. Extreme arrogance will blind you to the lethal danger of breathing right against your own neck. Gianna keeps digging her own grave, standing there in the low light below Mimite, practically bragging about how she poisoned the well. She leans in, her fingers brushing against the dark ink of Dante's tattoos, whispering that he is finally free, that they can be together now. The room goes dead silent. Dante does not just reject, he snaps. He grabs her wrist with a grip so vicious you can almost feel the bone strain. He pulls her close, his voice dropping to a cold gravel, and tells her the twisted fantasy she built is completely dead. He says she is incredibly lucky to be walking out with air still in her lungs, and here is the truth of it, my friends. When you treat human hearts like pieces on a chessboard, the game always ends with you playing all by yourself. Panic finally washes over Gianna's face. She starts screaming, begging him, saying he cannot do this to her. Dante does not even blink. He stares her down and says he already did. Before turning his back, he drops one last heavy threat. By morning, every single bank account she has is frozen solid. She is cut off from his money, his crew, and his world. If she ever dares to breathe Sophia's name again, he will erase her from the earth without a trace. He leaves her sobbing in that cold apartment, his mind racing on how to fix his broken marriage. 3 days pass in a blur of regret. Sophia wakes up to find her absolute favorite white roses sitting quietly on Elena's front step. But as we all learn eventually, sometimes a dozen flowers cannot fix a million broken pieces. The roses are wrapped in plain brown paper with a short card. Dante writes that he is not asking for forgiveness, just one chance to try. Sophia tosses them straight into the garbage. The next morning brings yellow tulips, the exact flowers she casually mentioned, loving years ago. In a passing moment she thought he ignored. The note says he remembers every single thing she ever told him. He was just terrible at showing it. She trashes those too. But on the third day, a small package arrives. Sophia freezes. The address is in Dante's rough handwriting. Inside sits an old, beaten-up leather journal packed with his messy notes. You and I both know the truth here. A physical record of someone's bleeding heart is nearly impossible to just throw away. Sophia slowly opens the cover, finding the first entry from their wedding day. And Dante wrote about how she looked at him like he was a man worth saving, promising to spend his life trying to be that guy. She keeps turning the pages, absorbing years of his silent thoughts. He documented her coffee orders, her laugh, and the crushing guilt of dragging her into his violent mafia life. Then, the ink gets heavy.
He would slip away, feeling helpless to stop it. He described standing in the dark bedroom, paralyzed,
wishing he had the courage to just wake her up and talk. It is a harsh reality. If you do not find the bravery to communicate, you will eventually end up writing your apologies to a very cold and empty room. We flip deeper into Dante's mind, and the ruthless mafia boss is falling apart on the page. He writes out about how he should have been the man Sophia deserved. Instead, he was too obsessed with the Marone syndicate deal to see what he was losing. The final entry is from the night she walked out. She called him from the hospital, and he sent her straight to voicemail. Now, he sits alone in a hollow penthouse with her wedding ring heavy in his pocket, not finally realizing the true cost of his ambition. Never take the people who hold you together for granted, because once they quietly walk out that door, no amount of money or power can fix the trust you shattered. But Dante refuses to accept the end. He decides he has to try and win her back. Dante writes that even if she never forgives his failures, he owes it to her to try. Sophia reads this, the worn paper trembling in her hands. She does not throw it away. Weeks drift by. She starts taking quiet evening walks, trying to rebuild her strength. Out in the shadows, she spots them. Dance men silently guarding the street corners. He is protecting her, even after she told him to stay away. Strangely, she finds a quiet comfort in it. That battered leather journal becomes her nightly ritual, the pages turning soft from her touch. It brings us to a painful reality about love. Sometimes the absolute hardest part of moving on is the quiet realization that you still deeply care for the very person who broke your heart. It is a quiet heartbreak when you realize the man who froze you out actually burned for you the whole time. Sophia stands looking over the Brooklyn skyline, the city lights blurring. Beneath Dante's untouchable mob boss armor, he really did love her. It does not erase 3 years of sleeping next to a ghost. It does not thaw the ice in her bones. But it shifts something heavy in her chest. Her friend Elena sees it right away, calling her out on that dangerous pull backward. For 3 years, he made her feel entirely invisible. Now, he is pouring his soul into diaries and treating her like royalty. You and I both know the hardest lesson in the dark. People are complicated, and trusting the right version of a person is the greatest gamble of your life. Listen to me for a second, because Elena delivers the kind of raw truth we all need to hear. She tells Sophia to let go of the ghost of who Dante used to be. The only thing that matters is who he is willing to become right now. No more cheap flowers, no more smooth, hollow words. He has to prove it. It is a brutal life lesson we constantly ignore. Never fall in love with a ghost of potential. Make them put in the actual work. Sophia looks down at the heavy diamond wedding ring Elena dug out of a drawer, letting the cold metal ground her. She makes her choice. She picks a small, ordinary coffee shop deep in Brooklyn, Newt ground, far away from his sprawling estates and his terrifying enforcers. She strips away his power, making sure the boss cannot hide behind his shadows. Sophia sits near the cafe window when she finally spots him on the sidewalk. And merciful heavens, the absolute ruin of this man. Dante looks like a hollowed-out shell. Dark circles shadow his eyes like heavy bruises. A rough scruff covers his jaw, and that bespoke suit hangs off him like a crumpled afterthought. Without his polished armor, the dark in his neck tattoos seems to crawl up his pale skin. He is the walking image of a man crushed by the weight of what he threw away. It is a tragedy we see too often. Sometimes a man has to hit absolute rock bottom before he finally opens his eyes. Sophia offers a tiny, fragile wave through the glass. The ruthless king of the underworld slowly walks toward the door, looking exactly like a dead man walking at her. He slides into the narrow booth, keeping a deliberate distance between them. The silence is suffocating, finally. Sophia ceaselessly shatters Char the Quiet, telling him flatly that he looks terrible. Dante offers a fractured, miserable smile. If he whispers that he feels even worse, she tells him he deserves every ounce of that pain, and he takes the blow without flinching. Then, she crosses the point of no return. She tells him about the diary. She knows he loved her the entire time. Her eyes lock onto his, and she delivers the fatal truth. His love was never the issue. You and I need to remember loving someone silently in the dark corners of your mind means absolutely nothing if you never step up and fight for them in the daylight. She dismantles him right there in the booth. Sophia tells him his love was a useless, silent thing buried in locked memories. While he was playing the tragic, distant protector with hidden guards, she was withering away from the isolation. Dante breaks. His deep voice splinters as he tries to validate her pain, but she cuts him down instantly. Leaning across the table with a fire he has never seen, she tells him to stop talking. No more empty apologies, no more tragic excuses. If he wants her, he has to earn it every single day. Here is a truth you can carve into stone. An apology is nothing but cheap smoke, unless it is anchored by real, consistent change. Dante just stares at her, entirely paralyzed by the absolute miracle that she is not closing the door forever. Sophia delivers the final blow. She tells him he does not have a second chance. He only has the rare opportunity to earn one. Standing up, she gives him one crushing ultimatum. If he chooses his dark empire over her even once, she will vanish forever. Then she walks out the door. Dante is left anchored to the booth, his tattooed knuckles turning white as he grips the wood. Listen closely, because this is how you protect your own peace. You have to draw a heavy line in the sand and dare them to cross it. So, what does the Broken King do? He fights a new war to win it. Every day, he arrives 30 minutes early, secures their booth, orders her favorite drink, and waits in the quiet, like a humble, entirely devoted man. You and I have to pause and admire the sheer magnitude of this shift. Dante places his phone face down on the table and refuses to touch it. Emergency calls from the syndicate vibrate against the wood, sent instantly to the void. When his right-hand man texts him about a crisis, Dante simply types 2 words, handle it. Sophia sits across from him, watching this man wrestle his deepest, most toxic demons in broad daylight. They sit in that booth for hours, unpacking threes of suffocating silence and profound loneliness. She reveals how the poisonous whispers of his inner circle slowly choked the life out of their vows. It leaves us with one painful, unshakable truth. If you allow venomous snakes to nest in your garden, they will eventually burn down your entire home. Listen to the rain against the glass tonight, and let me tell you about Dante. He sits at that dimly lit table, taking her pain without making a single excuse. Sophia looks him dead in the eye, describing that cold hospital room. She admits her body was giving up because she felt invisible in his shadow. Right then, this untouchable mob boss begins to tremble, he whispers, realizing his neglect almost put her in the ground. But instead of leaving, Sophia reaches across the wood and touches his scarred hand. She simply tells him she survived. He shatters, admitting she should have left him years ago,
when he chose the street over her. There is a quiet truth here we all need to hear. Owning up to your darkest mistakes, without a shield or an alibi,
is the only way to start just mending musically the heart you have deeply broken. The room goes totally silent. Sophia lowers her gaze, confessing she simply loved him too deeply to walk out that door sooner. You can feel the heavy air. She studies his exhausted face, taking in the raw panic hiding in his eyes. Stick with me here, because this is wild. This is a man who runs an underground empire with an iron fist, yet he is paralyzed by the thought of losing her. She does not use this power against him. Instead, she tells him she is finally understanding that loving a man should never require burying your own soul. Dante is waking up to the fact that devotion is built on action, not hollow vows. It brings us to a harsh but necessary lesson, True. True demands is relentless effort from both people involved. Otherwise, the strongest foundation will turn to dust. She tightens her grip on his fingers and tells him that is why she is choosing her stay. Let the clock roll forward a few weeks. Sophia receives a long-awaited call from her doctor.
The test tries finally turning around. The poison of stress is draining some of her systems. Her strength is returning. And the physical toll of her trauma is fading into memory.
The doctor tells her to keep doing exactly what she is doing. And what she is doing is finally claiming her own space. She begins moving back into that massive penthouse on her own terms. She places her worn paperback novels right alongside his dark leather ledgers. There is a beautiful piece of wisdom right there. Never shrink your spirit just to fit inside someone else's life. Stand tall and make them carve out room for exactly who you are. Now, her family photographs sit proudly in the grand living room, carefully framed by Dante's own hands. She is planting her roots in the very halls where she once wandered like a forgotten ghost, and the ruthless boss is actually proving his worth. He walks in for dinner, and that curtained phone stays buried in his coat, entirely silent. On the nights the underworld keeps him late, he does not slip into the dark. He wakes her with a gentle kiss, asking about her day, and remembering the smallest details. It is not always a perfect picture, of course. Sometimes she catches that familiar tension in his jaw when the streets demand his attention. But here is the lesson that matters most. Real progress has nothing to do with perfection. It is about waking up every single morning and actively choosing to fight for the ones who hold your heart. You and I both know that peace is a fragile illusion, especially in a world built on blood. Dante is finally making the right choices, breathing life back into their broken trust. But the universe has a cruel sense of timing. Sophia is standing in the warm kitchen when the heavy door flies open far too early. Dante walks in, his expression carved from stone, radiating a suffocating fury. She asks him what is wrong. Instead of building a wall between them, he steps close, gripping her waist hard enough to ground them both. He confesses the terrifying truth. A traitor is in their ranks, family secrets are bleeding into the streets, and rivals are preparing for a bloodbath. It serves as a grim reminder for all of us. The exact second you close your eyes and enjoy the warmth, the snakes in the grass will prepare to strike. Sophia does not flinch. She looks the Don straight in the eye and asks what was stolen. Dante is vibrating with rage. The leaks are catastrophic. Smuggling routes exposed, safe houses compromised, and names of loyal men handed to the enemy. This is the betrayal that fills the graveyards. When she asks how it happened, his voice drops to a lethal whisper, swearing he will tear the city apart to find them. He steps back, the warmth leaving his face. He is becoming the cold emperor of the underworld once more. Historically, this is the moment he abandons her, retreating into his dark office while she suffocates in the shadows. She braces for that familiar rejection, but he stops with his hand on the doorframe. Closely, because this is vital. True strength is never found in shutting out the people who love you when the storms roll in. He turns back, his dark eyes locking onto hers. He tells her he has to wage this war, but refuses to leave her in the dark. If the violence spills over, I think she needs to know the plan. It is a small concession, but it rewrites their history. She stands her ground, telling him she is not running anywhere. Dante crosses the room fast, kissing her with a fierce, desperate gratitude. Then the spell breaks. He is back to business, barking orders into his phone at the office door. But before it clicks, he makes a vow to be at the dinner table, no matter the cost. Hours pass, and the city streets are tearing themselves apart in chaos. But when the clock strikes, the door opens. He kept his word. Here is a lesson you can take to the grave. A man of real character honors his promises, even when his world is engulfed in flames. The syndicate boss takes his seat at the table, savoring the meal she prepared. His phone is dead silent, his focus consumed by the woman across from him. Picture this with me. Out in the dark, the rival Moroni family smells blood. They mistake his quiet evenings for weakness, assuming he is distracted by his marriage instead of breaking skulls. They push his boundaries, begging for a vendetta. But Dante changes the rules. For the first time, he delegates the violence. He passes the street commands to Marco and relocates his strategy meetings straight to the penthouse. He refuses to lock Sophia out again. There is a deep truth hiding in this moment. You do not have to carry the weight of every battle by yourself. Just learn to share the burden is exactly what makes a person unbreakable. She shares just enough of the shadows with her, ensuring she is prepared if violence knocks on their door. Late one evening, Marco leans against the wall and voices the dangerous thoughts echoing in the streets. He tells Dante the men are whispering. They claim the boss is losing his edge, calling him weak for prioritizing his wife over the empire. Dante does not even blink. He stares through the open doorway, watching Sophia calmly read a book, unaware of the danger. Dante's voice drops to a deadly pitch. He states he will not let this cursed life bury the only soul he loves. If the Maroney cartel believes his devotion makes him soft, they are about to receive a horrifying reminder of why he wears the crown. Let this sink in. You should never mistake a man's hose in his tomb for a lack of absolute savage power. That freezing, lethe energy floods right back into his veins. You can see the heavy tattoos shift on his knuckles as he grips the desk, preparing for slaughter. He looks at Marco and makes it crystal clear. Standing by his wife is not a vulnerability. It just means he finally found something in this dark world worth taking a bullet for. The tension snaps on a cold Thursday night. Dante uncovers a massive ambush planned at the downtown warehouse. This is a fire he has to extinguish with his own hands. He is loading his weapons, slipping into the mindset of a cold-blooded survivor. But just as he reaches for the door handle, Sophia appears in the hallway light. Pay close attention to this. Finding something genuinely real to protect does not make a man weak. It transforms a common fighter into an unstoppable force of nature. She looks at the armed man before her and simply tells him to come back to her. Think about how much has changed. Years ago, she would have faded into the background, wondering if she would be picking out a casket by dawn. But tonight she holds her ground, forcing him to meet her gaze. Dante frames her face with those rough hands, swearing on his life that he will return. Sophia looks right into the eyes of a killer, and he better, because they still have life left to build. He kisses her for one breathless second, then walks out into the crossfire. She is left in the silence, but for the first time in life, she believes. Promise. Here is the takeaway. When you finally stop hiding and demand your true worth, the world has no choice but to honor it. He returned at dawn, bruised but breathing. We are witnessing a shift in the shadows. The Moroni syndicate is erased. Dante carved a warning into the asphalt. Nobody threatens his family and lives. It is past 3 in the morning when the lock clicks. He stumbles through the door, coated in the blood of his enemies. Sophia takes one look at the carnage, asks 0 questions, and guides him to the bathtub. With quiet hands, she begins washing away the brutality of the streets. Beneath the terrifying reputation of the Don, she sees an exhausted man, grateful that she stayed. He watches her wrap the bandages, his voice trembling as he admits she was his only thought in the dark. Listen to this, genuine, unconditional grace holds the incredible power to soothe the most dangerous monsters among us. It's nice. Simon Temshmensch Kansijga. Dante stands there, a man who used to breathe only for the Empire, the cold cash, and the blood-soaked crown. Whenever the lead flew, his mind was on the throne. But tonight, the script flipped.
The desperate need to make it back to Sophia. She searches his haunted eyes, asking if the ghosts are finally dead.
He does not sugarcoat it. This particular war is over, but the crown is heavy, and vultures always circle the throne. The truth is brutal, but here is what matters. A raw, bleeding truth is always better than a beautiful lie. Only when we stop hiding the darkness can we actually build something meant to last. She does not flinch. Her hands just keep wiping the blood away, whispering that she always knew what she was signing up for. Dante stares at her, marveling that she never ran. Then, his bruised hand shoots out, catching her wrist. He pulls her into his shadow and begs for a second chance at forever. He wants to marry her again. No dark backroom deals, no mafia signatures. He wants us to drag their love out into the light and give her the dream she was robbed of. Confess the poison in his veins, how his arrogance almost broke them, but her grace saved him. It reminds us of a quiet truth in this loud world. It is never too late to pick up the pen, rewrite your tragic chapters, and give the ones you love the fierce devotion they always deserved. The bathroom falls into a heavy silence, save for the slow drip of the faucet. Sophia is pulled back into the icy memories of her past, the endless nights sobbing into a cold pillow, the agony of being a ghost in her own marriage. But then the warmth of his recent efforts washes over her sphere. The quiet flowers left on her vanity, the journal entries bearing his soul. The way he finally looks at her like she is his only oxygen. He is a flawed man, but he is doing the grueling work of changing his nature. A single, breathy yes escapes her lips. Dante pulls her against his chest, varying ifs in her hair, as if she is salvation itself. After all the storms, she finally feels safe. It proves that spoken promises are just empty air, but Tesson's humble actions will always mend a shattered trust. You and I have seen how cold the morning light can be, but not today. So Sophia opens her eyes to find Dante already watching her. Once, having a ruthless enforcer tracking, her sleep would have brought pure terror, but today his jagged edges are gone, replaced by raw devotion. His morning voice is a heavy whisper as his scarred fingers gently trace her jaw. When she softly asks why he is staring, he admits he is just trying to memorize her. He confesses, with deep regret, that he threw away 3 precious years pretending he did not need her.
Now, he intends to spend his life making up for every lost second. So, she could have laughed it off, but his gaze is sincere.
It just goes to show how true vulnerability can melt the hardest armor into something truly beautiful. Instead of deflecting with sarcasm, a knot of emotion rises in her throat. She whispers that they have a wedding to plan, but Dante just presses a gentle kiss to her temple, murmuring that breakfast comes first. They bypass that lonely dining room and sit together at the kitchen island. And here is the twist. the city's most feared Don cannot cook eggs to save his life. They are burnt to a crisp. But his heartfelt effort means more to Hervst. Diamonds questioners erasing the nightmare they used to call a marriage. As he scrapes the ruined meal into the sink, he suggests a private rooftop ceremony, inviting only the people who truly care. The lesson here is profound. True power is not commanding an army. It is finding absolutely peace in the quiet, ordinary moments. She lays down the law: no mob bosses securing alliances, no fake smiles from dangerous men. There's just goes genuine love. A shadow of shame crosses Dante's face. Sophia makes it clear she wants a celebration of their souls, not a networking event for the syndicate. Setting her coffee aside, she finally sees he is truly trying to heal the wounds he caused. Dante leans against the marble counter, his inked arms crossed, shedding the skin of a kingpin to reveal a man consumed by love. He closes the distance between them, letting his dangerous facade completely shatter.
Your voice breaks as he confesses that the days he spent without her were the darkest hell he has ever known.
It is a painful reminder that we often fail to recognize the treasure we hold until it slips through our careless fingers. The Don looks her dead in the eye and admits the emptiness of losing her was worse than staring down a loaded gun. It was more agonizing than betrayal, heavier than watching his empire burn. All that underworld power means nothing if he cannot come home to her. His hands grip her waist, pulling her off the stool until there is zero space left between them. He vows, with a desperate edge in his voice, to spend his remaining days proving he understands her true worth. In that breathless moment, Sophia lets her defensive walls fall completely. She kisses him with a fierce, undeniable hunger, finally claiming his soul as her own. It is a striking lesson in love. When life finally hands you a second chance, you simply have to seize what is yours and refuse to ever apologize for it. When they finally break apart, Dante stares at her like she is the only heir left in the room. He demands they take their vows again immediately, desperate for the world to witness that she is his, even after the darkness he dragged her through. Stick with me here. This is where their dynamic entirely shifts. Sophia slowly traces the dark ink across his neck, feeling the frantic hammering of his pulse. Looking this lethal man in the eye, she lays down 3 weeks to prepare. Her family, her cousin, and absolutely zero mob associates. No underworld business masking as a celebration. The lesson is crystal clear. Setting firm, unshakable boundaries is the absolute foundation of real respect. And she has difficulty teaching the substitute how to love her properly. She is not done holding his feet to the fire. She demands his complete presence. No glances at burner phones, no vanishing into the night for cartel disputes, absolutely no abandoning her. Dante's jaw tightens, swearing on his very soul that he will not miss a single heartbeat. A breathtaking smile finally breaks across her face, wiping away years of heavy misery. She whisps her agreement, and just like that, the next 3 weeks erupt into beautiful chaos. Sophia is finally blooming, obsessing over floral arrangements and hunting for a dress that feels like true freedom. Her fiery cousin Elena is right beside her, mercilessly humbling the pretentious wedding planners. It teaches us a vital truth. Choosing to find profound joy in the ordinary things is the absolute sweetest revenge against a painful past. Elena is a fierce protector, relentlessly shooting down the extravagant centerpieces. She stares the designer down, declaring that Sophia wants elegant roses, not a theatrical display. The planner stammers, protesting that the Don's wife previously approved the design, but Elena cuts through the noise with raw honesty. She notes that Sophia only agreed because she was trapped playing the compliant mob wife for years, and that dark era is dead. Sophia's beautiful laughter fills the room as she confidently demands simple white roses. Meanwhile, Dante is fighting his own instincts to keep his promise. He sits quietly through endless cake tastings, ignoring a phone vibrating with Underworld emergencies to debate frosting colors. It proves a vital point. A true partner consistently shows up for the little things, no matter how violently chaotic their own world might be. The journey toward the light always has shadows. The cold ghost of Dante's past still rattles its cage when the streets demand his attention. You can watch the tension in his jaw as he wrestles with the toxic urge to handle things with violence. Yet he firmly anchors himself to her side, choosing love over chaos. It is a grueling internal war, but genuine transformation requires walking through the fire. Then, a mere week before the vows, the shadows return. Marco, his trusted enforcer, steps into the penthouse with a grave expression. He glances nervously at Sophia, silently waiting for the boss to dismiss her. Instead, Dante anchors his hand on hers and commands Marco to speak freely in front of his wife. The warmth that floods Sophia's chest is indescribable. It is the ultimate testament that true intimacy is only built the moment all the hidden secrets are finally laid bare for good. We are about to uncover what happens when the past refuses to stay buried. Marco delivers the crushing blow, revealing intercepted whispers. The rival Calibri syndicate is plotting to drench the wedding in blood. Stinging from lost territories, they crave a theatrical slaughter. Marco's voice trembles as he unleashes the darkest truth. The enemies know about Sophia. They realized she is the Don's only the vulnerability, the very beating heart outside his chest, and they intend to shatter her, to destroy him. The air in the penthouse drops to freezing. Sophia watches as the tender man she loves morphs back into a lethal, unyielding predator. His fists clench, ready to burn the city to the ground for her safety. It serves as a haunting reminder. The desperate need to protect the ones we cherish most will always awaken the absolute fiercest monster hiding within our own souls. Dante's voice drops to a lethal whisper as Marco lays out the brutal truth. Victor Calibri, a phantom from the Underworld, plans to turn their wedding day into a slaughterhouse. Their ultimate prize? Sophia. They see her as the singular crack in Dante's impenetrable armor. And Dante, he does not deny it. The heavy truth of his love is a liability he is willing to kill for, swearing to drown his enemies in blood before they ever touch her. Listen to me. Recognizing the very thing that can break you is not a flaw, it is the tactical advantage a man can possess. He is ready to unleash pure hell upon the streets, a storm of bullets and vengeance. But before he can summon his soldiers, a fragile hand grips his trembling arm. Sophia stands there, refusing to be broken. Sophia locks onto his dark, storm-filled eyes and refuses to yield an inch. The wedding stays, she tells him, her voice slicing through the heavy tension of the room. Dante is suffocating, terrified of losing the one thing that keeps his black heart beating. But she stands like an absolute queen, carrying the weight of 3 agonizing years where she let this violent world shove her into the cold shadows. She is done bleeding in silence. If these men want to end her, she dares him to be, instead of locking her away in some concrete tomb. She refuses to bury her dream under the dirt of his enemies. Because running from the darkness never brings back the light you have to strike a match and face the shadows head on. That fierce spirit is everything. She anchors him to the earth, reminding him of the sacred vow he made to put their bond above his bloody empire. This is it, the ultimate test of his redemption. Dante is fracturing, lying under the pressure, begging her not to trade her precious life for a single night of celebration. But she just cups pocket his hard, scared face, forced the terrifying kingpin to look at the woman he shattered. She whispers that she still sees the gentleman buried beneath all that ruthless gangster Idam. Tell you, when someone peers through your darkest sins and still believes in your light, it is the most powerful salvation you will ever find. The heavy silence in the room is deafening. Slowly, the frozen wasteland of his heart thaws, and he surrenders to a desperate plea. He lays down a ruthless set of rules to keep the Reaper at bay. Every shadow must be watched, every soul background checked, and Sophia is never to leave the safety of his side. She offers a soft, knowing smile, whispering that she never planned to let him go anyway. Over the next few days, the venue transforms into a beautiful fortress. Men with cold eyes sweep every inch of the grounds, planting cameras that watch like mechanical hawks. Even the waitstaff carrying silver trays of champagne are hardened cartel soldiers, hiding heavy steel beneath their tailored vests. It is an ocean of paranoia and impending violence. Yet, amid the terrifying chaos, Sophia remains perfectly still, untouched by the panic. Finding absolute peace while the hurricane rages is a true superpower. Most of us would be suffocating under the crushing weight of that anxiety, ready to burn the invitations and flee into the night. But Sophia has fundamentally changed. She spent years trapped in a gilded cage, trembling at the echoes of her husband's violent life, till the stress physically tore her apart from the inside out. Her doctors called it chronic neglect, but it was really the slow death of a broken spirit. Now, she is entirely done playing the hollow victim. She understands that surviving this brutal mafia underworld means staring directly into the abyss without blinking. The crosshairs will always be painted on her back. But remember this truth: it is far better to stand tall as a bold target in the sunlight than to wither away as a frightened victim in the dark. The morning of the ceremony bleeds into the sky with a warm, flawless golden hue, setting the stage for their rooftop defiance. Sophia stands quietly in the vast bedroom that once served as her solitary confinement. Today, those same walls breathe with the sweet air of actual hope. She studies her reflection, tracing the elegant lines of a sleek white silk dress, stripping away the heavy, suffocating layers of her past life. The hollow shadows under her eyes have vanished, replaced by the radiant warmth of a woman who has fully reclaimed the song. Truly transforms everything about how you carry yourself in the world. Elena steps softly behind her, fighting back a flood of joyful tears, whispering that she looks absolutely breathtaking. For the very first time in years, Sofika whispers that she actually feels beautiful, wrapping Elena in an embrace that speaks volumes of unspoken gratitude. As she thanks her cousin for pulling her from the drowning depths, for providing a sanctuary when her heart was completely shattered, and for fiercely shaking her awake, almost she'd have accepted a life devoid of love. Elena grips her shoulders with fierce loyalty, reminding her she was always a masterpiece who just forgot her own value. Hold on to those rare souls who fiercely remind you of your worth when your own vision gets hopelessly blurry. A heavy knock echoes through the wood. Marco's deep voice signals that the wait is over, drawing in a massive breath. So Sophia steps out onto the terrace. It is a stunning sea of white roses. The rooftop is a breathtaking collision of romance and impending danger. Dude, was winter delicate fairy lights whited through the rich greenery, casting a warm glow against the fading, bruised colors of the sunset. This is no hollow gathering of mob associates. It is a fiercely guarded sanctuary of absolute loyalty. Only the true survivors remain Sophia's fiercely loyal bloodline and the hardened soldiers who would gladly take a bullet for their boss. Dante stands waiting at the altar, looking like an angel of death in an impeccably tailored dark suit. His collar rests open just enough to reveal the wicked ink crawling up his throat, radiating a silent, lethal promise. The truth is, stripping away the crowd of fake smiles to keep only those who would bleed for you is the most liberating choice. To the outside world, Dante is a cold, calculating sovereign of the criminal and underworld who commands fear with a single breath. But in this fragile moment, his dark eyes are desperately anchored to Sophia, completely blind to the loaded guns surrounding them. As she drifts down the aisle, every step stitches together the agonizing emotional chasm they thought was torn forever. Elena is sobbing openly, while Marco offers a deeply respectful nod to the woman who tamed his master. When she finally reaches out, Dante's tattooed hands responsible for unimaginable violence, are visibly shaking, voice fractures completely as he breathes her name. It shows us that no matter how impenetrable your armor is, profound love will tear it all down and leave you beautifully bare. Dante begins his vows, and the raw agony pouring from his chest is entirely unscripted. He admits to the crushing guilt of 3 years ago when he stood before her reciting empty promises, foolishly believing that simply feeling love was enough to sustain it. He grips her trembling fingers and confesses his ultimate sin. He allowed his intoxicating hunger for power to consume him, letting his beautiful wife fade away into the cold, neglected corners of his massive empire. He arrogantly assumed she would wait in the shadows forever, nearly losing his entire soul to his own suffocating pride. Tears slip down Sophia's cheeks, but she refuses to look away, because love without consistent, visible action is just a hollow word waiting to crumble. You have to constantly show up. With a voice thick from suppressed, Dante swears to the heavens he will never repeat those agonizing mistakes. He declares to the armed man watching that his brutal empire is nothing but background noise. Those his lungs actually need. He reaches into his pocket and pulls out a beautifully scarred vintage gold band. No blood diamonds today. It belonged to his grandmother, an heirloom meant exclusively for the one soul he simply could not exist without. He confesses an agonizing night he stood in their vacant home, clutching her goodbye letter, shattered by the realization of what his blind ambition had cost him. We all need to hear this loud and clear, never to take your loyal supporters for granted, because all that cold money cannot hold you at night. He slides the humble, weathered gold ring beside the heavy diamond she had once left behind. He vows to love her out loud in the blinding light of the day, refusing to push her aside whenever the violence of his world demands his attention. The silence hanging over that rooftop is profoundly heavy, thicker than the humid evening air. Hardened killers are staring at the floor, fighting back the lump in their throats. Sophia blinks away her own tears, her voice remarkably steady as she meets his gaze. She quietly admits her own youthful failures, tracing the lethal, scarred knuckles holding her hands. She confesses to chasing a flawless fairy tale, naively believing that love should never hurt. But listen close, that the deepest bonds are forged in the fire. True love demands the fight. You and I have seen enough heartbreak to know this truth. Sophia stands there, the cold wind catching her veil, and lays it all bare. Love is a grueling, everyday choice. She looks deep into Dante's eyes, confessing how she faded into the background, thinking his dark world required a shadow for a wife. But a king does not need a ghost. He needs an equal. She holds up a silver band, refusing to sugarcoat the blood and tears of their past. Apologies do not wash away trauma. Instead, she vows to stand in the fire with him, taking their shattered pieces and forging an empire. Here is a truth for the midnight hour, running from your pain, your pony fidi, de ive. Real Sulstrith is Ymir, the ugly truth, standing your ground and doing the heavy lifting to rebuild. She slides the cold metal onto his scarred hand, a silent vow binding them. She tells him she is not pledging her life to the ruthless phantom the streets fear. She is choosing the man who burns their morning toast, who hides relationship books in his desk, and who stood shivering in the freezing rain just to say he was sorry. Dante lets out a choked, desperate laugh. The iron whirls around his heart, caving in. She whispers she is never walking away. The priest mutters the final words, but they are lost in their own universe. Dante pulls her against his chest, capturing her lips in a kiss that tastes like tears and salvation. Listen closely, friends. True devotion is never about money or intimidation. It is found in those silent, awkward moments where you put your prides aside to be a better person. The applause swells, and for one fleeting second, everything feels totally untouched by darkness. Then, the world fractures. A sharp, hollow crack splits the night air. The crowd assumes it is a car engine, but Dante knows that sound in his bones. His spine goes rigid. Marco screams for everyone to hit the floor, shattering the romantic haze. Instantly, the catering staff drop their silver trays and pull heavy rifles from their coats, forming a defensive ring of pure violence. Elena screams, grabbing for Sophia, but Dante is already moving faster than humanly possible, shifting into absolute survival mode. Hear this clearly: peace is a fragile illusion. Life can drag you from a dream to a nightmare in the blink of an eye. You must always stand ready to defend the ones who hold your heart. Dante barks an order, his fingers wrapping around her wrist like a steel trap. He yanks her against his chest, and in one fluid motion, a heavy pistol clears his tailored suit. He moves with a sickeningly muscle memory born of bloodshed. A second massive boom shakes the rooftop. A stone planter just 3 feet away explodes, spraying soil and shredded white roses across the marble. Marco shouts into his radio, identifying a sniper on the southeast building, and orders a strike team to eliminate the threat. Dante does not even blink. He physically shoves his new wife toward the penthouse doors, turning his broad back into a living shield against the rain of bullets. It is a harsh truth of the human condition. Words mean absolutely nothing when the fire starts. Your true devotion is proven entirely by what you are willing to bleed for. Return fire erupts outside Snetsk, echoing like rolling thunder across the dark skyline. Inside the penthouse, the chaos is muffled, yet the thick walls suddenly feel like tissue paper. Dante is frantic. His hands shake violently as they roam over Sophia, desperately checking her for blood. The mask of the untouchable boss is gone, replaced entirely by the choking panic of a terrified husband. She grabs his rambling wrists, swearing she is unhurt, and demands to know who brought a war to their wedding. His voice drops to a freezing whisper as he names the Calabris family. They moved far too fast. Elena and the sobbing guests scramble inside as guards barricade the shattered glass. It is a heavy reminder that the ghosts of your past never stay buried for long. Settle your old debts before they come to collect the people you love most. Dante barks into his earpiece for a status report, his hand gripping Sophia, and will like she might dissolve into shadows. He listens to the grim reality, his jaw clenching tight enough to snap bone. His voice goes totally hollow as he gives Marco a ruthless command. He wants Victor Calabres brought to him alive if they can manage it, dead if they have to. Tearing the earpiece out, he looks at his bride, and the mob boss melts into a broken man. He starts spiraling, pouring out frantic apologies, hating himself for underestimating the threat and not delaying the wedding. But Sophia grabs his lapels, yanking him back to reality, firmly shutting down his guilt. There is a brutal lesson here. Wallowing in your own regret during a storm will only get you drowned. Put the guilt aside and focus entirely on surviving the night. Sophia takes his trembling face in her hands, forcing his wild eyes to lock onto hers, anchoring him in the storm. She tells him that nobody is in the ground yet. Right there, she owns her destiny. She knew marrying a kingpin meant sleeping beside a loaded gun with targets painted on their backs. Dante leans his forehead against hers, shaking, confessing he cannot survive losing her again. But Sophia does not offer empty comfort. Her voice turns sharp and freezing. She orders him to stop crying over his toxic world and start fighting to keep them alive. She is his equal, not a fragile victim. A real partnership requires a profound trust. You must stop treating the people you love like delicate glass and start relying on their strength. You either face the fire together or you burn alone. Stick with me here, because you can literally watch Dante's expression shift. It goes from agonizing fear to deep respect, straight into the cold calm of a killer. Sophia demands the raw truth. Dante spills the nightmare. 15 mercenaries surround the perimeter. That sniper? Just a distraction. The real invasion is breaching the ground floor, carving a path directly to Sophia. Dante's voice goes hollow. Victor is out for blood because his son was collateral damage in an old turf war, and he blames Dante entirely. It is pure, unadulterated vengeance. Sophia absorbs this instantly, her mind racing to check on the safe room. We all need to remember this harsh truth. Your past actions have a massive ripple effect. You can run from your history, but eventually the ghosts will find your door. Sophia quickly confirms that the room is locked down. She looks him dead in the eye and asks the darkest questions of the night. What happens if the hit squad breaches the penthouse? Dante's face turns to granite. He arrogantly vows they will never make it that far. Right on cue, the power dies. Pitch black. Seconds later, the emergency generators grind to life, bathing the penthouse in a sickly, blood-red glow. In that tiny window of darkness, the wolves got inside. The shattering of heavy glass echoes down the hall, followed by aggressive shouting. The gunfire is practically vibrating in the floorboards now. Dante shoves Sophia into a dark bedroom near their escape route, his gun raised, totally shielding her with his body. It is a fatal mistake we all make. The second you get opponent and underestimate your opponent, they will break down your door. Always stay humble. The tension in this room is suffocating. Dante shifts into protector mode, ordering Sophia to stay behind him and run if things go south. But Sophia refuses to play the tragic maiden, reaches out and grips a heavy crystal vase, her knuckles. She tells him they are doing this together. Here is a simple truth for you. When you find a real partner, you face the fire side by side. Dante just stares at her, totally awestruck, when the hallway door violently splinters open. 3 men in tactical gear storm the room. Dante's reflexes are terrifying. 2 deafening cracks, and 2 men hit the carpet. But the third ignores Dante, tracking his weapon straight to Sophia. Target acquired, he yells into his radio. It is a sickening twist. They did not come for the boss. They came for the wife, but That mercenary never gets to finish his transmission. Dante shuts the threat down with cold precision. A single shot between the eyes, and the third soldier drops like a stone. Move, Dante roars, tearing through the smoke. He grabs Sophia's arm, pulling her over the lifeless bodies. They sprint down the shadowed corridors of their own home. It is a terrifying realization the sanctuary, where you rest your head, can become a slaughterhouse in seconds. That is why you must always have a backup plan in this unpredictable life. The air is thick with chaos. Over the roaring gunfire, you hear Marco screaming desperate orders, his men bleeding to buy their boss time. Dante skids to a halt at the grand staircase. Heavy combat boots are thundering up the marble steps. They are completely surrounded. Dante spins on his heel, his mind calculating survival in microseconds. They pivot fast, making a desperate break for the private study. They rush into the study. This is the very room where Sophia's uncovered those hidden journals, proof he had loved her all along. But tonight, romance is dead.
They desperately need the concealed exit
Behind the bookshelves.
They are mere feet away from salvation when the door absolutely erupts inward. Jagged splinters and thick plaster dust choke the air.
As the smoke clears, the final boss steps through the ruin. Victor Calabris, an old silver-haired mafia don with the coldest, deadest eyes you have ever seen. A cruel smirk pulls at his face. Dante Bellini and the lovely bride.
How convenient, he rasps.
For ruthless enforcers step up beside him, weapons raised. They are staring down a firing squad. Let this sink in for a moment. Your past mistakes never just magically fade away. They will always come knocking on your door when you least expect it. Dante does not flinch. He stands his ground, his weapon steady, and asks the one question hanging in the heavy air: why today? Why ruin the wedding? Victor shatters the silence, his voice cracking with a father's pure agony. He screams that Dante murdered his 23-year-old son right at his birthday party. An eye for an eye, a celebration for a celebration. Dante tries to justify it, swearing the boy was pushing illegal guns and knew the risks. But a grieving father cannot hear reason. His boy is gone, and he only wants blood. Here is a quiet truth. Revenge is a toxic cycle that leaves nothing but empty chairs at the dinner table. Dante tries to shield Sophia, begging Victor to let her go, but Victor just offers a hollow smile. To him, she is the ultimate prize. Victor turns to Sophia with a smile that makes the room feel 10 degrees colder. He confesses he has been watching her from the shadows for months, waiting for her spirit to shatter on its own. But the moment Dante pulled her back, she became the perfect target. Victor raises his weapon, aiming directly at her chest. He wants Dante to swallow the bitter pill of losing his own family. But Sophia refuses to be a helpless victim. In a split second, she grabs a heavy crystal vase and hurls it at Victor's arm. Sometimes the hardest lesson we learn is that nobody is coming to save us, and we have to fight back ourselves. The glass strikes true, ruining his aim just as Dante pulls his trigger. A bullet rips through the ceiling, and the room erupts into pure madness. Dante's bullet catches one of Victor's men, and the study instantly turns into a brutal war zone. The roaring gunfire drowns out the terrified screams. Dante forces Sophia against the wall, turning his own body into a human shield as he returns fire. Victor is screaming through the chaos, but his hired guns are dropping fast. Thick powder smoke blinds everyone. And then there is only a heavy silence. You know, life teaches us that every violent storm eventually runs out of rain, but it always leaves wreckage behind. Sophia slowly opens her eyes to a ruined room. Victor's bleed usually on the hardwood, clutching a wounded shoulder. Marco and his crew have breached the doors, kicking weapons away and securing what is left of the broken hit squad. Dante towers over Victor like the angel of death, his tattooed fingers gripping his gun. His voice drops into a terrifying whisper as he tells the bleeding man he should have never looked at his wife. Without a shred of mercy, Dante presses his heavy boot right into Victor's open wound, dragging a raw shriek of agony out of the broken father. Dante is ready to end this bloodline forever. But before he can pull the trigger, Sophia's soft voice through the red haze. She steps forward in her torn wedding dress, begging him to stop. Here is a hard truth to swallow. Real power is knowing exactly when to step back from the edge of the abyss. She reminds Dante that he already won is because he kept her safe. She is desperately trying to anchor his soul before he drowns in the dark. Sophia gently rests her hand on Dante's trembling arm, feeling the wild pulses of adrenaline hammering through his veins. She tells him the absolute truth. If he pulls that trigger today, on the day they promised to wash their hands clean, it taints everything they are trying to build. You and I have probably made choices in anger, but the real lesson here is that true strength lies in choose mercy when you hold the power to destroy. Dante's jaw locks tight. The gun remains pointed, and for one agonizing heartbeat, the room holds its breath. Slowly the barrel dips to the floor. He orders Marco to drag the old man out. Marco hesitates, but the boss's word is law. As Victor's broken curses fade down the hallway, Dante finally turns his exhausted eyes to his wife. All the calculated menace drain us out of Dante's voices, leaving behind the man who looks completely shattered. His large hands are trembling as he reaches out to her, his voice breaking as he admits how close he came to losing himself. He whispers that he might never be the good man she deserves. But Sophia does not pull away. She closes the distance, pressing her ear against his racing heart. The simplest lesson we can learn about love is that it does not demand perfection. It only asks that we listen when our partner calls us back home. She tells him she never asked for a saint, just a man willing to hear her voice. Dante wraps his arms around her like a drowning sailor and clinging willing to driftwood, and in the ruins of that room, they finally confess their deepest love. Sophia steps back, looks into his tired eyes, and quietly says they need to finish what they started. With the rooftop swarming with police, they move the ceremony down to the penthouse living room at the stroke mid. There is a tragic poetry to this. This was the exact room where she used to sit alone, feeling invisible. But tonight it is glowing with warm candlelit and genuine devotion. Here is something to remember. A cold room becomes a home the second the people inside it change. Marco stands faithfully as the best man, ignoring the blood drying on his shirt. Sophia, standing tall in a torn dress that smells of burnt powder, grips Dante's hands tight. The nervous officiant rushes through the final vows, and they are pronounced husband and wife. Dante does not let the officiant finish his sentence before he pulls Sophia in. This is not a flawless cinematic moment. This is raw and desperate. A kiss that tastes like burnt gunpowder and sheer survival. It is the embrace of two souls who waged a bloody war just to keep each other. The survivors in the room break into applause. Elena is sobbing quietly, and even Marco, the stone-cold enforcer, lets a real smile slip. For the first time, Sophia feels completely cherished by the man she married. The lesson here is simple sometimes. We must endure our most agonizing battles just to earn a quiet peace. But the story does not magically end here. The following months are brutal, as Dante is forced to the dangerous down of Victor's broken criminal empire. Dante has to crush the power vacuum immediately, moving with ruthless efficiency to stop rival families from circling. He is working brutal hours to clean up the mess, but there is a massive shift in him. Stick with me no matter how dark his days get. He comes home to her every single night. Even at 3 in the morning, he slips into bed, wakes her softly, and genuinely asks about her day. He starts showing up for the quiet moments he used to discard, like sharing breakfast and taking evening walks. Here is the undeniable truth. Consistency is the loudest way a person can say they love you. Actions will always outspeak promises. Dante is finally figuring out how to be a devoted partner. And beneath his steady affection, Sophia's lingering trauma finally begins to fade away. Her doctor calls her recovery a true miracle. Before, the heavy weight of emotional neglect was quietly shutting Sophia's body down, but now, anchored by a man who finally sees her, she is thriving. Fast forward 1 year after that midnight wedding, and Dante pulls off a massive surprise. He does not fly her to a glittering resort. Instead, he drives her to a secluded, cozy house on the coast of Maine. He bought it in secret, fixing it up just for her. He walks her inside and calls it their safe house, not a bunker for the mob, but a quiet refuge just for them. The lesson we all need to hear. True wealth has nothing to do with flashing luxury. It is simply finding a quiet corner of the world where you can hide from the chaos with your favorite person. Sophia wanders the quiet rooms, totally speechless. This house is the exact opposite of their intimidating city penthouse. The floors are warm wood, the couches are soft, and the walls are painted in colors she casually mentioned loving years ago. The terrifying Underworld boss was quietly taking notes. On the mantel sits one framed photo from their midnight wedding. They look battered, but their faces are lit up with pure joy. Dante wraps his arms around her from behind. He confesses that he spent 3 violent years building a dark empire he thought mattered, but it is completely worthless without her. Here is a lesson for the night. An empire is just an empty pile of dirt, unless you have someone real to share it with. Against all odds, this ruthless boss finally got it right. Picture this final image. Dante, the king of the city's underbelly, stands before his wife completely stripped of his armor. Sophia traces the dark ink on his neck, admitting she thought they were buried for good when she walked out. She believed her husband was swallowed by the violence. Dante does not try to deny it. His deep voice cracks, confessing the old him was just a hollow vessel, poisoned by an obsession for absolute control. But he looks into her eyes and says her leaving was the exact thing that finally killed the monster. Now, the man left behind belongs entirely to her. Those same scarred hands that used to coldly sign death warrants are now gently cupping her face. The truth is, sometimes finding the courage to walk away is the only way to force real, lasting change. Dante lays it all out, stripping away the armor he wore for years. He looks at Sophia, the woman who stayed anchored when he was at his absolute darkest, drowning in terrible choices. His voice breaks as he swears as to never take her presence for granted again. When she pulls him in for a kiss, the raw, electric pull between them is overpowering. He begs her to stay, not for a stolen weekend, but for a lifetime. Then the unthinkable happens. The ruthless Dante Bellini takes putting his wife first. They vanish into the quiet for 2 weeks, just slow mornings and him fumbling uselessly in the kitchen while her laughter fills the room. It is a beautiful truth we all must face. Chasing empty power means absolutely nothing without your ride or die. For 2 weeks, it is just the rhythm of the ocean and the complete absence of underworld bloodshed. Returning to New York, the cold cage of his penthouse has finally transformed into a warm home. Fast forward 5 years. Sophia stands by the glass, then bathed in the fading sunset. She is 7 months pregnant, feeling their little girl kick with the stubborn defiance of her father. Nearby, Dante is locked in a high-stakes negotiation. But you and I both know the truth. That is the redemption we crave. Real power is not about ruling a shadow kingdom with an iron fist. True strength is knowing exactly when to let your guard down and soften for the family you built. The door swings open, and Dante slips into the room, stepping up behind her. He rests his scarred hands over her belly, whispering how beautiful she is. She leans back against his chest, wrapped in a safety she once thought impossible. Then she asks the heavy question, does he ever regret stepping away, leaving Marco to run the daily mob operations? Dante does not hesitate. Never. He admits he built a terrifying empire, but nearly tore his soul apart doing it. Now, he holds the real power, the quiet peace of this room, and he knows what is worth keeping. The baby delivers a sharp kick, and the fearsome boss lets out a deep, genuine laugh. It is a stark reminder for all of us. Success means absolutely nothing if the ultimate price you pay is your own true happiness. Dante jokes into her hair, saying it is to be trouble. With their turbulent blood, she will be a beautiful menace. They stand quietly, letting the main sunset wash over them. Miles away, Marco is likely suffocating under the stress of a bloody turf war. Years ago, that chaos would have consumed Dante. But standing here, the street drama feels like another lifetime. He turns to her, confessing then that he loves her in ways his damaged heart never knew were possible. She looks up into his eyes. The exact same eyes that used to be pure ice are now overflowing with unwavering devotion. Sometimes you have to strike the match yourself. You have to let the bitter, old version of your life burn to ashes so the better one can finally breathe. Sophia traces his jaw, whispering that he spent 5 years proving his devotion. Dante pulls her close, promising to spend his remaining breaths doing the exact same thing. As they kiss, you can feel the heavy weight of those kept promises. The sun finally sinks, pulling the curtain down on their toxic past. These two completely shattered one another. They dragged each other through the mud, only to rebuild their fractured souls into something bulletproof. It is not some flawless fairy tale, but it is real, permanent, and enough. That is the deepest truth we can walk away with tonight. True loyalty is not a cheap feeling that only shows up when life is easy. If you felt the weight of this journey, hit that like and subscribe button and stay with me for more Midnight Tales. This brings us back to the core truth of love and loyalty are not passive ones. They are a conscious choice you make every single morning, especially when your world is falling apart. You and I have probably both learned the hard way that you cannot just have through a meaningful connection. You either commit to the fire or you walk away. When you pick your path, give it everything you have. Do not let blind ambition hollow out your soul the way Dante almost did. Choose your people, choose your peace, and protect the ones who's held your hand when you were nothing but broken glass. That closes the book on the Bellini saga for tonight. I will be right here, waiting for you next time. Keep your loved ones close and stay safe out there in the dark.